Elementary school parents revolt as school orders kids to eat outdoors to guard against COVID. Parents are counseled to dress their kids in raincoats and sweaters in case it rains and they have to eat their little bologna sandwiches in the rain. So public schools don't even want your kids inside the building to eat their lunches now. What's next? Making them pee in porta potties at the construction site next door? For the love of God, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. We are that program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today's show is sponsored by Mike Lindell and our friends at MyPillow. MyPillow is always offering great deals, and this week they've got their iconic pillow, the one that launched the empire, for just $30. All you have to do is use the code Dr. Duke, D-R-D-U-K-E. It's simple. D-R-D-U-K-E, and you can save mucho dinero on all kinds of great goodies at MyPillow. Go ahead and give it a shot for your sake and for ours. Before we start, if you're watching us on social media, just hit that share button, please. Simple little thing that blasts out our show and gets us more people watching, more pillows bought, and the whole economy, the economy depends upon it. Today, we start in crazy California as parents of elementary kids were told to make sure students wear warm clothes since COVID protocol still forces them to eat their lunch outside. Really, Katie?
Yes, in fact, you must eat your lunch outside, at least if you are at Patwin Elementary School in California. And the principal, Gabor Gorgonon, sent the message which said, rain is forecasted this week, which will present an added challenge to our lunch routines. Davis Joint Unified School District students are required to eat outside at this time due to COVID restrictions. I am asking you to send your children to school with rain gear and warm jackets. So basically what is happening is they've had to have these restrictions this entire time. Obviously, we know it's California, so they sent the kids out for all the lunches, and basically they're not allowed to be anywhere near each other for anything. Now, Reopen California Schools founder Jonathan Zackerson basically said the message spurred a bevy of complaints, which I can't believe why. And it was directed, obviously, at the administrators and the school board. As Zackerson said, this exemplifies California's response with kids during the pandemic. The inhumane treatment of children continues from masking all day, even outdoors, to having to sit on hot cement and now eating lunch in the rain. So they've been having these kids put out in conditions this entire time, every day of the school year. Now it's just continuing now that the weather's changing and it's going to be more rain, maybe a little bit cooler. So bring your warm jackets.
Yeah, Mom. So you've got to dress your kid for survival eating. You never thought that would come to this, right? You send your little toddler off with this little brown bag, or I guess California wouldn't allow that. You're some kind of microfiber, vegan constructed little bag. You send your kid out with his little sandwich. Never did you think you'd have to have him prepare for all weather, right? Have him dressed for sunny and cloudy and windy and rainy. And sitting in hot cement eating my lunch at the age of 6 or 7, I'm not sure that would be the funnest thing in the world. But what happened? Following the outcry, and there was a great big outcry, the district released a message to concerned parents that students would be now permitted to eat indoors whenever possible. What exactly does that mean? Whenever possible. I mean, if you're already so terrified of COVID that you force the kids out into the rain, when would be an appropriate time they can eat indoors? When would that be?
Never in their minds. And you have to remember, this was hard for me to understand. And actually, I only understood it via watching, I think it was Encino Man, the movie Encino Man. But California
Nicolas
school...
Cage? No. Who was the caveman?
Brendan Fraser. Who is
Brandon Fraser.
He shares my birthday. Anyway, the schools in California, because most of the time it is nice weather, they're set up differently than any of the schools we have. So they have these outdoor open spaces, and some kids actually walk outdoors to get to the other side of campus. And it's just weird for my little brain to think because we have just
a little quad.
They have a quad. We just have like hallways that are dark and dingy. How like my life. Now, what they're supposed to, or what they're going to try to do is keep it so that the kids are not going to have to be like subject to that heavy downpour that's out there. The principal then said, some parents are very happy with our decision to have students eat outside, and others are concerned. Our campus is not ideal for eating outside due to the lack of a solid walkway cover, and that's what I'm saying about like the outdoor space and how it works. So she said, I guess it is she, in collaboration with our district staff, we looked at all the alternatives. All of them. If during lunchtime we have a heavy downpour of rain, it will be challenging to eat under the covered walkways. During a heavy downpour, again, they're defining terms here, we will have a staggered lunch with one grade level at a time in our MPR for 15 minutes. Wow, 15 minutes, kids. It's like you're in the military. Eat up. With all 10 doors open, woo, and 2 air purifiers running. This is.
Are you
I don't
kidding
understand.
me?
After 15 minutes, students.
It's like a coma protocol.
Yes. After 15 minutes, students will be dismissed to their classroom for inside recess. If you prefer that your child remains outside to eat, please inform your teacher, and we will make accommodations to support your
wait a
request.
second. Why are you allowed inside for inside recess, but not to eat? Is eating somehow more dangerous than running around screaming and playing kick the can or whatever you do in indoor recess?
Old
I
are
don't
you?
know. What do you do in indoor recess?
At indoor recess, I played sheep's head.
Okay, you played
Which we-
sheep's head. There
we
you
should
go.
Not have. Do you even know what sheep's head is?
It's a card game,
There
right?
you go. You did it.
A form of spades, isn't it?
Ish.
All right.
Ish. I'll give you ish on
I'm
that.
in the know.
Not really.
But my point is that eating is a more dangerous activity than recess?
Well, if it's indoor recess, the kids are just going to have to be stuck playing board games. But
still,
you would assume there's actually more interaction.
If you're playing board games, you're sitting across a little board, you're talking, you're playing. That's different. That's more dangerous than sitting a couple feet apart from each other and eating a sandwich.
Anyway, it's California. This is what they do. Get your raincoats. Now, before we move on, just a reminder that if you do enjoy our content, please consider joining the Patriot Club. Your tax-deductible donation keeps this show right on moving down the tracks. Simply visit patriotclub.us to get signed up. That's patriotclub.us. And as a special thank you, we will ship you our signature tumbler that says American Patriot and has Mr. George Washington. Buff. All right, well, it's no wonder at this day and age that our kids' mental health is completely shot, completely destroyed. Just look at the last story we talked about. Poor children. 15 minutes. Hey-ya. Now, American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and the Children's Hospital Association warned that kids' mental health had reached crisis levels. Say it ain't so, Dr. Duke. I didn't see it coming. The cohort of health professionals noted that the decline of children's mental health had already been a concern for nearly a decade, and this pandemic kind of exacerbated everything. They put out a declaration, and here's what it said. We have witnessed soaring rates of mental health challenges among children, adolescents, and their families over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, exacerbating the situation that existed prior to the pandemic. And they noted the rates of childhood mental health concerns and suicide rose steadily between 2010 and 2020, and by 2018, suicide was the second leading cause of death for youth ages 10 to 24. But now the pandemic has intensified this crisis. Across the country, we have witnessed dramatic increases in emergency department visits for all mental health emergencies, including suspected suicide attempts.
Let me see if I can try to understand this. So, starting about 2010, we're teaching kids now at young grades that they may not be the gender they think they are, telling kids as young as 5-year-olds, don't let your body deceive you. See that little girl sitting next across from you if you're a boy? You may be that. You try to get kids to grapple with that. Then you're telling kids about the time they get to middle school about how to perform anal intercourse, right, correctly. And then you're telling them that the world's going to end through global warming. You're telling them that anybody who voted for Donald Trump is a monster and half the world hates you.
But that's 22. We're still back in 2010.
I'm working forward through
where you are
up
going
to,
through.
up to COVID.
Okay.
Then you also spent a decade telling little children, right, that white people are guilty for the whole world's problems, telling little white kids that every bad thing that's happened is their fault, telling minority kids that no matter how hard they work, the evil white 5-year-old sitting across the table from them is holding them back. And then comes COVID. And for 3 years, 2 years now, you've told them that we're all going to die. The end of the world is coming. That teachers can't teach you because they're terrified that you're going to sicken them. They find everything you do a disease-ridden plague, like the last story, can't even eat lunch indoors. And we wonder why kids are having mental problems. Is that a fair list of the overview of what happened to what's going on in education? Why not just take these kids and throw them in sweatshops like the Chinese kids and make them work 18 hours a day sewing uniforms for the NBA? I bet you those kids aren't nearly as suicidal as our kids.
Either way, horrible situation. Now, NPR reported overall from 2020 that the percentage of emergency department visits for mental health emergencies rose by 24% for children between the ages of 5 and 11 and 31% for those 12 to 17, compared with just 1 year prior. And so in 1 year's time.
Given that it's smug NPR, you know they're going to blame it on everything but what the real problem is: liberalism in the schools.
Well, anyway, the tragic rise was even sharper for teenage girls specifically. Now, we've reported on this a couple different times with tragic stories to accompany him. But over roughly the last year or so, suspected suicide attempts for girls ages 12 to 17 went up by an eye-popping 51% compared with the same period in 2019. And obviously, we know that a lot of stuff going on with that, in addition to everything happening in the schools, is the social media that they're on and the TikTok videos that they watch and the Instagram and all of that drama happening, and especially not being actually in school and, doing schoolwork and being stuck at home always on the social media because there's nothing else to do because they don't actually have to attend class. They're on the internet still, just not even attempting to do any sort of schooling.
Young girls, either you're in school and you want to kill yourself, or you're away from school watching progressive social media and you want to kill yourself. And again, I'm betting major bucks that NPR is blaming this on the patriarchy. Testosterone, what's the problem here, right? I mean, it's not that complicated. You have broken all the boundaries down. You've removed all the scruples. You've unethically, you deconstructed the ethics of life itself. You've made sex nothing more than an animal behavior and then forced kids to watch, if not participate in it. I wonder where these things are coming from.
Now, the letter that I mentioned before by those three groups also stated that we are caring for young people with soaring rates of depression, anxiety, trauma, loneliness, and suicidality that will have lasting impacts on them, their families, and their communities. We must identify strategies to meet these challenges through innovation and action, using state, local, and national approaches to improve the access to and quality of care across the continuum of mental health promotion, prevention, and treatment.
So health care for the sick, mentally sick. How about we just stop getting them suicidal? How about this? Let's cancel public schools. How about that? Cancel public schools, cancel progressive media. Bet my bottom dollar those little girls grow up to be normal human beings without all this stress and suicidal tendencies.
Now, some people in this room are big sports fans, some are not. I'll let you choose who. But we were told back before college football was set to take place this season that can't go to the games, super spreader events.
Super spreader.
It's going to happen in these big stadiums, all these dirty people there. It's going to be a super spreader.
No,
hasn't happened. It didn't happen. No evidence has come through with this. Science, though. So that means now that football coaches obviously must be fired if they're not vaccinated. And that's what's happened, I should say, to Nick Rolovich, who is the Washington head coach, Washington State football team. And he refuses to be vaccinated. In accordance with the state mandate then in Washington, he had to be fired. And so he was, but now he's suing. Rolovich's lawyer released a statement announcing that the former head coach of the Cougars is taking legal action against WSU for his illegal termination. And the suit also states that Rolovich has accused the athletic director, Pat Chun, of discriminatory and vindictive behavior. So he had tried claiming religious exemption for it, and they said, oh, no. It's interesting because it at first was a PR nightmare for what's happening in Washington State, and then I'll get to apparently the goodness, like for them at least. But the PR nightmare came after the big vocal response on the Twitters, and the Instagrams, on the Facebooks, everywhere. Luke Falk, who is a former quarterback on the team, had asked, "How can the government deny somebody a religious exemption? Did they talk to God?" That's a good question. Luke. Smart. I like it. But after, the comments, once they got past that and saw the dollar signs, the university seems to be okay because, the dollars really do talk. Following the firing of the coach, the university just magically secured the funding to build its indoor practice facility, which is $25 million. And Chun, remember he was just talked about, the athletic director, said, "We've raised over $3.5 million this week. And with that, we've hit our target goal for the IPF funding." And Chun had said that there was one multi-million-dollar donation that came through and then another handful of high-dollar amounts. So you put Nick out there, feed him to the wolves, and look what you get. You get a nice new indoor facility about it. What a great university.
And I want to go back to what Luke said about religious exemptions. It's amazing how few of these that the federal government and local communities, universities are actually granting. But you think about this, the vaccine, there's so many reasons why this could be genuinely upsetting to a religious person. Not least of all is the degree to which these vaccines, and they differ in the quantity, how much they're actually using processed body parts of aborted babies. I mean, that's a pretty serious reason to consider having a vaccine exemption. I can think about certainly Judaism and Christianity and Islam in most of their iterations. That would be enough, you would think, to grant somebody and if it's just somebody who may not be religious at all, but somebody who doesn't want that kind of processed human waste brought upon by the murder of a child, wouldn't want any part of that in their vaccine. It's a perfectly logical and legitimate thing. On top of the fact that we absolutely know that government is underreporting the consequences of people who take some of these vaccines. The collapsing, the enlarged heart conditions. There's just a lot of things that we don't know. And maybe the biggest problem of all is we don't know what's going to happen with these vaccines in 10 years. We have no way of knowing. We have no way of doing any kind of a study that would lay that out. And so you got to admire the coach. I mean, that's a lot of money he walked away from, and he did it because he had his own scruples, and good for him. I'm hoping some other better team, some other more broad-minded opportunity comes across his transept so that he'll be back on the sidelines. It's time now for some real education. In the doldrums of all this education news, we're not a lead. We're not one of that organization that says if it bleeds, we lead. We would love to spend days and days and days giving you positive stories, uplifting stories about how well-educated our kids were becoming, but we can't do that because that's not the reality. So instead, we give you instant classics. At the end of every show, we try to do some real education, uplift you with art and beauty and philosophy and aesthetic achievement, try to give you a sense of what a school used to be like before the progressives rooted to the ground. And so today, we are in the middle of Gustave Doré week. He is the great engraver. In fact, in his own day and time, he was very famous as a painting. His paintings are still very valuable and very worthwhile, yet it seems that his power as a wood engraver overshadows that in the modern era. He did really, really comprehensive carvings of scenes from all the great works of Western culture. One of my favorite books is Dante's Inferno, the entire Divine Comedy of Dante, and absolutely Doré did a definitive series of woodcut engravings for that book. Take a look at this one. We looked at the Bible the last 2 days. This is one of my favorites. This is from the Ring of the Suicides. This is that place in Dante's Inferno very far down in the realm of violence against self. There's violence against God, there's violence against other people, there's violence against the self. This is a horrible canto from the middle depths of hell from Dante. And notice what happens in this picture. Because these human beings threw their lives away, they murdered themselves. It's a maxim of hell that the criminal cannot take with him into the afterworld that which he despoiled. So if you were a thief, you had to give up the things that you were stolen. In this case, people who murdered themselves are not allowed to really have bodies. And as you can see, the bodies of the souls who have arrived there in this realm are instantly turning into trees because they can't possess the human body that they destroyed. So these souls become trees. And you can see to the right there the winged creature, and the bottom left you can see the winged creatures known as harpies. They are an ancient Greek creature, faces women and faces of women, and bodies of birds. They would fly recklessly through this forest of souls, and they would tear the branches, lop off limbs, and to the trees that would be actually like having an arm cut off or a limb cut off. Terribly, terribly painful. And for the degree of which the broken limb, the broken tree limb that is now the sinner, you'd rip that limb off, and while the blood oozed from the open wound, the tree would be able to talk until the sap stopped flowing, and then it would be silent again. And so what a really shocking, deeply profound punishment for those who murder their own bodies. They become a forest of trees. That forest is then mangled by nasty creatures known as harpies as a punishment for this kind of despair. And let's not forget what despair is. Despair is basically saying to God that my human plight is so bad, my suffering is so great, that you yourself, God, cannot help me, and therefore I will become the God of myself, and I will take my own life.
All right, we want to take a moment now to show some love to our Patriot Club members, and today we're giving the shout out to Wayne from Shingle Springs, California. Wayne, thank you for supporting us.
Shingle Springs, is that like chickenpox, Nevada? No? We hope shingles is just metaphoric for you, sir. Thank you for donating. And that wraps up the show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and it just makes me want to scratch all over.